Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again. We're still joined here in the studio by Ambassador Mohamed Shazly, who is a member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs, to talk to us more about the hot and the interesting topic, which is the situation in the Middle East countries, and especially focusing on Iraq. Sir, I want to go back to what's happening in Iraq and the situation, or how do you evaluate the role being played now by the European Union and the United Nations, especially that they interfered recently now and they did not interfere from the beginning? And what about cutting the funds or the assistance? Do you think by this they are helping the Islamic State over there?
No, I think, you know, that cutting the funds from whom? I mean, the Iraqi government certainly needs assistance. ISIS, or Daesh as it's called in Arabic, is receiving funds and is receiving armament. Let me tell you that Daesh, when they routed the Iraqi army in Mosul, they captured a huge amount of weaponry.
Huge amount of what, sir?
Of weapons.
Yeah.
And this has transformed the balance of power drastically in Iraq and in Syria, because a portion of this armaments captured by ISIS has been also transformed in Syria. And there is a very strong connections between the forces.
You know, sir, I cannot understand the timing of the appearance of this Daesh issue, or the so-called Islamic State of Iraq. I mean, where they were trained, from where they are funded, from where they have got all those weapons and all this amount of money, and where those militants were having camps, for instance, and why, and to say what they're saying, to claim what they're claiming of Islamic Caliphate, and to put the word N or Noon in Arabic on the houses of the Christians there, Noon coming from Nasara or Christians in Arabic, and they do have a strategic plan to capture refineries of oil, to seize the most important dam on the Euphrates River, as if they are a state inside the state. So how, why, and why now?
First of all, I mean, how were they trained and how were they financed? Training now, you know, the phenomena of armed insurrection is an international phenomenon. You have people that go to train in Afghanistan. Most of the people of ISIS in Iraq now have been trained primarily in Syria, in Lebanon, and unfortunately what has been happening in Syria has been financed from the very beginning by some of the Gulf states.
Qatar and Turkey.
Because not only Qatar, several Gulf.
Sir, I'm saying this because there was a document released by the Iranians themselves. There was very much published.
Were lots of documents.
And because of this, I mentioned those two according to this document.
I have no friendship with Qatar. And I have no animosity with other with other Gulf states, but the extremist factions in Syria, out of contempt to Bashar al-Assad, were financed by several Gulf states. This is a fact, and it is a documented fact.
Okay.
So this demonstrates the short-sightedness of the Arab political thought. If you are my enemy's enemy, does not necessarily mean that you are my ally or my friend. And this, I mean, shows the phenomena. And now, unfortunately, Iraq's oil has become out of control of the central state. The Kurds have controlled some of it, and after the Kurds have controlled the Iraqi oil, the first shipments of Iraqi oil has arrived to Israel. Now it is claimed that ISIS or Daesh has recontrolled the situation. Let me tell you something. In the year 2001, after 9/11, a couple of months after 9/11, there was a very important study paper coming out of the Carnegie Institute in the United States. And after 9/11, they said now it is clear without a shadow of doubt that the new enemy after the fall of communism in the Soviet Union is Islam. And the best way to
since then the Islamophobia term was invented.
And the best way to combat Islam is by using the internal
divide to conquer
divisions between the Muslims and the Sunnis. Since this paper was released, the Sunnis and the Shiites in Iraq have been at each other's necks. And the whole Sunni Shia problem. I have served in Iraq during the time of Saddam Hussein. I am not saying that Saddam Hussein is a good man. Saddam Hussein was nearly the devil incarnate. But at that time there was no Sunni Shia conflict. It started with after the American conquest of Iraq. They started releasing falsified figures saying that the Shiites are the majority in Iraq and that they are 70%, which is not true. The Shiites in Iraq are 40% and 60% Sunnis, but the Sunnis are divided between Kurds and Arabs.
I was speaking with Dr. Mervat, of course our political analyst also when we were reviewing the press, and I was speaking about this terrible word, minority. How I should categorize a sect of any society to be a minority or to be called a minority.
Let me tell you something. A minority is a numerical expression. You are two ladies, I'm one man, I'm a minority here. But if it turns out to be because you are one and we are two, you have no rights. This is what turns it into a malady. Every country in the world has numerical minority, and Europe there are Catholics and Protestants, there are Jews, there are gypsies, there are whatever. The whole idea of this is to assure the rights of the minorities and to assure that the majority does not turn into a dictatorship of the majority. This is and this is what, we are talking about, the Islamic state and the caliphate. And if you look at what is happening in Europe, it is the resurrection. I mean, the European Union is the resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire, of Charlemagne's empire. What they have succeeded in is that they have resurrected the Holy Roman Empire upon modern presumptions about democracy, freedom,
you name it.
Everything. We are those who are trying of Daesh and ISIS to resurrect the caliphate according to the thought of 1,000 years ago, not according to today. The European Union, they have the Union for European Nuclear Research. They have a space program. This is the future. Not, I mean, how the woman should dress, or should she have a veil, or should she have a veil, should the man have a beard, or shouldn't he have a beard? I mean, this is exhausting your energy into something that will never have an intrinsic effect on our everyday life. The scientific research with the scopes it open on health, on education, on everything, communication, how the quality of life should be upgraded, rather than conforming to stereotypes that do not serve any purpose today.
Okay. Ambassador Shazly, I want to know what do you think, or how the situation, the unstable situation in Iraq would influence the surrounding countries or the Middle East countries, and how they should, I cannot say interfere, but how they should act towards Iraq right now, especially that each one, as I mentioned before, is quite busy with what's happening inside his country.
First of all, by realizing that you cannot isolate what is happening outside your frontiers with what is happening. If you are not facing troubles today, you're going to face them in the very near future. The lesson we should get out of the European experience is that you cannot have stability and security without a viable regional system. Today we're looking at Europe as an oasis of tranquility and of stability. 50 years ago, there was a world war being fought in Europe. And before that, there was another world war fought in Europe. There were revolutions, there were assassinations, there were terror groups all over Europe. What stabilized Europe is that they had a stable regional system with a code of ethics. You cannot say that we are Arabs because we are racially Arabs. This turns it into a racial congregation. We are Arabs because we have a moral code. We have, if in Europe, one European country, somebody assassinates the king or the president, assumes power, he will completely be ostracized.